we did forget really our signature new brand, our brand that we merged is Environmental Joy. We started 2 years ago with an annual we have a global environmental justice conference whose theme has been environmental joy for the last 2 years and will continue to be. And by that we mean sort of what's the energy that we're bringing to this work.
I mean, one of the things that came out of the Environmental Joy Conference, the first one and then the second one as well, right, is that one of the foundations of joy is having agency. Right? One of the ways you disable people is by telling them they don't have agency. And one of the things you learn by looking at communities around the world, around the country, is they do have agency. And we need to lift that up, because that's where optimism comes from. That's where joy comes from, right? And we think, even in times when people are feeling discouraged, the capacity to make the path by walking, right, is central.
And frankly, even trying to control the environment with environmental laws are no longer the right tool, right? Right. Climate is, fossil fuels are deeply embedded in our macro economy, right? Tools we need to transition are macroeconomic and industrial, and policy, and social. We can't ask people who depend on trillions of dollars in cash flow, from truck drivers to pipeline operators to lunch counter operators, who depend on this particular way of running our world. We can't ask for those transitions to happen without thinking about just transitions and deeply rethinking. So we needed to take the structures back down to the studs. It would be nice to do it in a humane way, in a way that was logical and that could reach good outcomes and not hurt as many people as are being hurt right now. But it's also an opportunity for all of us to come together in an intersectional way and think about how to rewire the world in the way it needs to be.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Heartwood Podcast. New season, new looks, new digs. I'm your host, Dr. Thomas Rashard Easley, aka the Hip Hop Forester, aka a brother sitting with two amazing leaders in a particular space. In particular, we're talking about the legal and, of course, the environmental justice space. So before we go there, I want to say thank you for tuning in. And as we turn to our two friends, I would like to ask you if you maybe we'll just quickly, but introduce yourselves to our audience the way that you would do it, the way you do it.
I'm Gerald Torres, and depending which audience I'm talking to, I'll introduce myself different ways, but I'm the Dolores Huerta and Wilma Mankiller Professor of Environmental Justice at Yale School of Environment and the Yale School of Law. The thing about the named professorship, it's an honor to get a named professorship, but it's especially high honor, in my view, to have it named in honor of two women who were doing environmental justice, in my view, before it was called environmental justice. So Dolores Huerta is one of the founders of the United Farm Workers, brought the issue of pesticide use as a important issue both for labor but also for consumers, and put it on the agenda. Wilma Mankiller brought public health services and developed a public health service for her tribe. She was the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, and brought a public water system to her tribe. And in my view, that's doing environmental justice. So there are people who are committed both to the communities they worked with and to address kind of what I think of as environmental hazards to their work. So start from the beginning. I'm Gerald Torres. I'm the Dolores Huerta and Wilma Mankiller Professor of Environmental Justice at Yale, and the founder, I guess, of the Yale Center for Environmental Justice. I never know how to quite characterize that.
You're definitely that's definitely who you are.
There you go.
My name is Michel Gelobter. I'm the the first executive director of the center Gerald founded, the Yale Center for Environmental Justice. This is actually the first job I've ever had where I've had environmental justice in my title, even though I've been working on environmental justice for over 40 years, because I was also trained as an interdisciplinary environmentalist in the early days of when that kind of training would happen. And so I've been working on climate also for almost 40 years. And I have had a diverse career. I think I've come to realize over the last few years that I'm mostly a startup person. I'm a person who starts things, and it's anywhere from 2 to 7 years to get things going often, but I've done that a few times in my life. And to build the skill, I've done that in government, in academia, in advocacy, and in the business sector.
Okay.
I'm really driven by a calling I've had since I was 5, which was to do social justice work. The same way some people want to learn how to they want to be violinists.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the diversity in my career comes from sort of running into walls and seeing where do I need to go get training or build skills to understand how to get around those walls to drive more social justice.
Okay, so you don't let things stand in your way. You create paths. It's almost like when there's maybe no path or there's uncertainty or unclear. So you two scholars, gentlemen, professionals have come together, but what drew you all together to start doing this work, whether we're talking environmental justice or social justice or just addressing things that impact populations?
Well, let me give you my perspective, and then Michael can give you his. Michael was a trustee of the Natural Resources Defense Council, a while back, and he promoted my membership to join the trustees of NRDC, and so
he promised me a job for that then, and
we first met at NRDC at a trustee meeting, NRDC trustee meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably right.
No, let me be clear. The first time I met Gerald was across the street from the Treasury Department in Washington, D.C. on 15th Street. He was wearing cowboy boots and smoking a cigar. And he was the cowboy at the Department of Justice who was writing the Environmental Justice Executive Order that a bunch of us who'd been working out in the field had been, we didn't actually, maybe he even conceptualized it. We didn't know where it came from. We just knew it was a victory that it was being written, that we had been kicking ass in Washington for probably 15 years at that point. And the Clinton administration and Gerald were. So I remember him distinctly, panache and clouds of cigar smoke. And who is that masked man, Lone Ranger style. That was my first recollection of Gerald Torres. And I, of course, also know him as a great scholar in the field of critical race theory, which I used in my dissertation on environmental racism. And I think, by the way, is deeply tied to environmental justice as well. So that's how we met. And then I was on the advisory committee for the center here when it was first formed, and they were looking for a director. I was really interested in the work. I'll talk about why, but fundamentally, Gerald was helpful in coaching me to be willing to come to Yale. I have some problems with elite institutions being a longstanding justice worker, but have had a great time here and loving the work.
But thank you for mentioning that. I think that's something important, I think, to pull out, when you mention, being part of coming to an elite institution, but being of a different position, as far as like the positions that you've been fighting for and even the people that you've been fighting for. So recognizing that from community to a calling, is there anything else? Because now we're going to get into talking about the great work you're doing at the Yale Center of Environmental Justice, but is there anything else that you think led you all to doing that work with the center in particular, besides those two things that you shared with us?
I mean, there's a number of questions embedded in the question you asked, right? So the first question is it comes from the point that Michael made, which is we both have kind of cut our teeth in community work. Mm-hmm. So doing work as part of community efforts, and we've gone kind of parallel paths. In some ways, Michael wrote the first PhD in environmental justice, so he took a deeply scholarly approach to figuring out what these issues are. I approached it from the legal perspective and wrote both about how critical race theory informs some of the insight that's being generated by environmental justice advocates, but then also taking the critique that environmental justice advocates have been making and trying to understand it within the framework of the basic structure of civil rights law and environmental law. And at that point, I was already a legal academic. I mean, I started out as a practitioner, but then moved over to the academy, and mainly wanted to be an environmental lawyer, even though I'd spent a lot of time in the social justice movement before that. And what environmental justice permitted me to do was to bring those two interests together and to think of them systematically, and to kind of try to create an area of research. So one of the things about being in an elite institution, and Michael got his PhD from an elite institution, there's a couple of things that happen, right? One is being associated with an elite institution creates kind of currency, and so it's an asset that you can use and you can invest, you can spend, right? The second thing is when you're trying to carve a new path, academic or scholarly path, having it come out of an elite institution actually gives it more credibility, because
you're holding space.
You're holding space for that, exactly.
Okay.
Right. So, I don't have that. I don't have any. I guess I'm not uneasy being in an elite institution, right? Even though I realize that I don't know, in comparison to my colleagues who have generations of experience in elite institutions, I'm still pulling the straw out of my hair. I mean, I really did fall off the turnip truck, and I don't even know how to use all the assets that being an elite institution actually provides. If I did, probably we could do more. But that's kind of my story. I don't know, Michael has a different story, I'm sure.
Gerald's been coaching me on this stuff, as I have a couple other friends at Yale who come from more humble backgrounds and are familiar with the institution, and that's been really helpful. What I would just say is I want to underscore the extraordinary thing that Gerald just sort of passes over. There's not a lot of people in the country who've written seminal texts on critical race theory who would call themselves environmental attorneys. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that intersection, and I'll just, I think it's really, really critical. If I could just say, and I think it's really relevant for today also, and why the challenges we face don't worry me very much, which is that in the 80s, when the formal environmental justice movement really started emerging, was in many ways the low point of the idea that racism was a structural problem, right? Which is clearly what critical race theory is big time about. Some of the early critical race theory stuff was starting to be published, but we had a president, Ronald Reagan at the time, who said that affirmative action was racist, right? We had Supreme Court decisions in 1976 and beyond that had re-centered the individual prejudice as the source of racism, right? You had to show intent under the law to show that there was racism. Disparate impact was no longer an adequate standard. And then along came environmental justice, and it said that the water was racist, that the air was racist. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, who controls the air? Wait, that seems like a structural thing, right? And it's a hugely powerful insight that applies not just to civil rights in the United States, but to all the ways in which we think about controlling the economy and controlling justice anywhere in the world. Thinking about intervening is when you start to understand how literally interconnected we are, from humans to systems, and I think environmental justice has made that point more powerfully than any other movement in recent history besides Buddhism. We gotta go back a few thousand years for that. So there, I said it. Environmental justice is as big as the
Buddhist movement.
I actually believe that, but I'm not going to defend it on the air. But go ahead.
Oh, make sure I'm on the air. Okay, I'm gonna say, can we compare the tenets of EJ with the tenets of Buddhism, and let's just see if we can find a parallel.
I'll stand by it.
The dismal student over here is like, yes.
Yeah.
You're in the doom screen. Oh, great. All right. Yeah.
First, I want to thank you because you're mentioning things that have, of course, like when you say
you never been on TV with me before.
Oh. So I think that's the question. We should talk about the parallels of Buddhism and environmental justice. But I think the parallels of any faith practice that I think that deals with humanity, and how we're connected to the land, and how the land also affects us. I think that is powerful. But I want to also thank you for your courage, because you, I know you don't need the thanks, I know, but you're talking about, you mentioned social justice movement, environmental justice movement, then you also mentioned critical race theory. And we are in a time where I think all three come under, a lot of challenges. That's one way of putting it. So recognizing that you all are using yourselves, your resources to manage and to support various communities. I'd like to know, what are some of the focuses now of the YCEJ? Just in this climate and in this time.
Yeah. Well, Michael can talk at greater length, but right out of the gate, right. One of the things that the Center for Environmental Justice wanted to do was to take all of the various strands of kind of movement in environmental justice and see if we couldn't create a structure to tie them together, so that we spent a lot of time, and in some ways among kind of mainstream environmental justice groups really do have a strong focus on indigenous issues. And recognize that tribes have an important role to play, both in how we think about managing environmental problems, but also have been harmed in ways that are both specific and different from the way other communities have been harmed by what I think the maldistributional impacts of environmental policy. So. We wanted to look at both the kind of the distributional effects of environmental injustice, but we also wanted to look at the procedural and structural effects. That is, how is policy made, constructed, analyzed, and produced, and how do we need to act in that way so that we can have an impact on the development of policy. So one of the things that I think makes this center different, it's not unique, but different, is that we really do focus on generative actions. Just how do we generate change? How do we generate commitment? How do we create new spaces for the work to be done? How do we enable groups that are already doing this work to be more productive and to see the local, because a lot of them are local, to see the local as part of a kind of a global commitment to centering justice when we think about environmental protection.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I think the other element of generative is to honor, to raise up, honor, and have us all learn from not the victimization of environmental justice communities, which is real, but their innovation, their heroism, their thriving, and their resilience. In many ways, we are all increasingly going to be frontline communities for what's happening to this planet, and there's so much to learn from how those communities, how EJ communities make it anywhere in the world, and are innovating all the time. And so that's been a big piece of our focus for sure. I think we have Gerald has done an incredible job of creating an indigenous program. We're being joined by the former head of the National Park Service. In a couple of months, we've become our director of our indigenous programs. We have focal areas in energy justice also. Jigar Shah, who ran the USDOE loan office, has joined our advisory board. Very focused on, there's been a lot of investment in clean energy, but unfortunately, low-income communities don't have investable assets. So when you put solar panels in an inner city community, the roof does not belong, right, to the low-income community. Okay. So how do you get those big capital flows that are happening to actually redound to the pocketbooks of the people who live there, not just their green energy? There's work we're doing on that. We have a program on, and so it's a sort of indigenous programming, environmental justice, and then climate justice. And we're working on climate migration at a global level with partners around the world, sending students this summer to Angola, to Mexico, and to the New England Raven area. And we're also doing some really exciting work on artificial intelligence and environmental justice. And there's a lot to be concerned about with the human impact of AI, but our program is mostly focused on using AI to build what Al Gore says we most need, which is political will. So we build AI to build political will right now at the center, and we built some.
And I want to underline something Michael said, because it's really important, often gets overlooked, right? Because critics of environmental justice want to point to environmental justice communities and accuse them of just acting as victims. Right? We have never been about that. Right? We've located and identified injustices, but we've said right from the beginning that these communities are actually generating solutions that we have to pay attention to. We have to tease out the lessons from these groups that are doing work across the country, across the world, and ask, how can we take the insights that they're generating to respond to the challenges that they're facing and turn that into policy, turn it into programs, turn it into projects, so that I said one of the things that makes us different is that we are a generative center, but in fact what we're doing is we're trying to build on the stuff that people are already doing and raising it up and highlighting that knowledge. That's, I think, one of the things that locates the power of this project, is that it's not it's not a bunch of eggheads sitting around thinking big thoughts, right? It's actually looking at what people have actually done and how they've actually tried to change the world to address the challenges that they're facing, even in little ways, because those little changes actually give us insight as to what the bigger changes ought to be.
We did forget really our signature new brand, our brand that we merged is Environmental Joy. We started 2 years ago with an annual we have a global environmental justice conference whose theme has been environmental joy for the last 2 years and will continue to be. And by that we mean sort of what's the energy that we're bringing to this work.
Right. I mean, one of the things that came out of the Environmental Joy Conference, the first one and then the second one as well, right, is that one of the foundations of joy is having agency. Right? One of the ways you disable people is by telling them they don't have agency. And one of the things you learn by looking at the communities around the world, around the country, is they do have agency. And we need to lift that up, because that's where optimism comes from. That's where joy comes from. Right? And we think, even in times when people are feeling discouraged, the capacity to make the path by walking, right, is central.
You made me think about, so I just got to bring up a pop culture great top 5 movies. The Matrix, okay? Okay? Just The Matrix, all right? And the way that I just have to bring it up. It's just, and it's because of what you just said about the walking part, as I'm listening to you all, it's like, I think we're in a time of a lot of uncertainty and confusion. And if someone, and what I don't want to do, I just have to say and just say, give us solutions now. No, the reason why I'm bringing up The Matrix is because it seems like people who are doing the work, in many ways, they have ideas as you're sharing, but they're walking the path and you're figuring it out as you're moving, as the star did in the film. And I really take a lot when you, instead of talking about victimization, you're talking about agency and power. I really would like to know what happened in like, say, your professional careers or careers that helped you to make that change, okay? Or if you had to make that change, how about that? Because I know, like for me, growing up as a child in civil rights communities and in my family, I saw how over time the courage grew, how over time the willingness grew. But they were always putting their bodies on the line. But the truth is, a lot of them didn't believe change would come. So I just want to know was there any significant, like he's pointing, that just helped with this switch, or was there a switch? Have you always had that we're moving focus, we have agency power, but we have to redefine how we look at things so that we can keep moving forward?
I'll let Michael answer first. I have a take on that, but
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some of it just has to do with my background. My parents are both basically refugees to this country, and my father in particular went through some pretty horrific stuff, and they were both activists also, though. I mean, they came to this country, my father when he was 15, my mother when she was 9. My father ran Shirley Chisholm's campaign for president, and he came here from Poland as a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and was basically the mechanical chief of signatures and convention strategy for Shirley Chisholm. So, when I went to the convention with her when I was like 9 years old, first Secret Service agents for presidents gave me their cards. So that was, I was very blessed to be immersed in that stuff. I would also say that something I've just become aware of recently at a personal level is that I cannot stand narratives of one downness, of being, one down. And a friend of mine, a fundraiser I worked with recently, just said that I have a tendency in meetings to reframe things from deficit frames to strengths frames. Now, to be clear, they're both needed, right? If you study rhetoric, you study politics, you got to go negative as much as you got to go positive if you're going to win. You got to attack and go positive. That's both really critical pieces of the strategy. But in general, I'm always thinking, when in my climate work, I have a mantra. I say, I refuse to own the problem. If you want to tell me that fixing climate change is going to be hard, yes, for people who do the work, it is hard. But the world we live in right now is pretty damn hard. All right. The war in Ukraine paid for itself. The revenue to Russia offset the cost to Russia of killing all those people. From the oil revenue offset the cost to Russia of killing those people. The fossil fuel industry today gets $7 trillion in subsidies globally. We suffer from air pollution. We drive unconscionable distances to work when our kids should be in daycare centers next to our work spots. We have wars over oil. We live in a world that is made extremely difficult by the fossil fuel economy, and we ignore those difficulties we already ignore them at our own peril. So anyway, that's an example. I'm just like, I'm not going to own that problem. I know that a world powered by sunlight is a better world by far. Here's a quick stat. All the fossil fuels that humanity has ever used in our entire history amounts to the energy content of 1.2 days of sunlight hitting this planet. Now, if we can't take that gift and do better, I don't know what's wrong with us.
Yeah, I also think, thinking that we can power the future on the dead bodies of our ancestors is a bad bet. It's a bad bet. And when you're pumping oil out of the ground, you're pumping the bodies of the peoples, the things that lived here, the creatures that lived here before, right? I know that some people say, okay, that's a little airy-fairy, but it speaks to me, I think, in important ways. One of the things that you asked where, like Michael, I refuse I resist the victimization frame. I just resist it. And I've resisted it, I think, for my whole life. And it's not to say I didn't see injustice. It's not to say I didn't see harm. It's not to say I didn't see suffering. But it didn't I refuse to permit it to become the thing that defined me. Right? Okay. That's one. Second is and this is just dumb luck, or as the Russian novel had it, the irony of fate. I was born at a great time. I was born at a great time in a great place. I was born in California at a time when the zeitgeist was optimism, right? When the idea was that you could make the future, right? That there were challenges, you bet, right? There were challenges, school children being attacked by police dogs in the South when I was a kid, right? So none of this escaped me. There were, black girl blown up in a church in Alabama. None of this was all happening when I was a kid, but that didn't defeat the idea that we could make a better world, right? And that the actions that I undertook, and not me alone, but my actions could contribute to that, right? And that if you didn't see the kind of future that you wanted to get to, you weren't ever going to get there, right? Could you see it in all particulars? No, of course not, right? Could you see the things that had to be changed to get there? You bet, right? Did you win constantly? No, but what you did is you learned from the things that didn't work and tried something else and kept going. And so that, the kind of the spirit of innovation committed to progress, I think, is part of what kind of defined my frame of mind growing up. If I'd been born in some other place at some other time, it probably would be different. But that's, I consider that one of the assets that I have. And now it's like just part of who I am. So.
Since Gerald raised ancestors, I do want to thank. I don't know what it's going to sound like to you listeners, but we are sitting in a room with a lot of trees in it and some beautiful rock.
Yes.
I'm as I get older, I'm increasingly aware of how much I live with my ancestors in every place I am, including this chair I'm on.
I want to say there's another way you can look at it. You can look at this room, which is a wood paneled room. You can look at this table, which is a big oak table, or oak chairs, as a form of contained carbon.
Supportive and loving contained carbon that helps people learn with good acoustics and a nice, comfortable place to put their butts.
The sequestration of carbon in this room contributes to the intellectual development that will produce the changes that will sequester other carbon sources in the future. But we ought to recognize that too.
Yes,
right? There's sequestered carbon in this room.
Yeah.
See, that's what happens when you put scholars and lawyers and environmentalists and brilliance and just everything all in one room. You come up with a lot of great ways of not just defining things, but framing it. And I'm taking so much from. I feel like I got the sandwich. You say we need some of the negative and we need the positive, but to have a clear path forward. As you said, you have to technically vision the world that you want to keep moving in it. So, big elephant in the room, and we're not going to eat this elephant one bite at a time. We're going to love the elephant, but we've had a change of federal administration. Things have changed from the last time that we talked, and now, of course, our first time talking and meeting. I keep it general. It's general. We understand that environmental justice, is in a challenging position right now. Okay, with everything that's going on. And whatever you feel comfortable saying, though, how has some of those shifts affected your work? So how has it affected or has it at the center of environmental justice?
You can approach it from a variety of ways, right? Obviously, there are specific and material changes that will affect how the work gets done. That's one way you can look at it. You can also ask, have the changes fundamentally decentered the thing that motivates the work? And the answer to that is no. Right? That one of the things that the environmental justice movement has produced slowly and over time, right, is the clear recognition that if you don't center justice in the environmental programs that you are constructing to address the environmental harms that are already out there, then you're only doing half the job. Okay. The centering of justice, for which I think we owe a lot to the environmental justice movement, right, is going to remain. And it's going to remain globally. It's going to remain an issue. Is it going to be, are we all going to be happy with the way it's expressed? Absolutely not. But that's going to survive because I think that's now integrated into the way we think about issues. And it ought to give us the foundation from which we build our resistance to the attempts to move us back to an era in which justice didn't matter. Because I don't think that's going to happen. Are there going to be real challenges? You bet, right? Are there going to be threats? You bet, right? Are we going to have to think about novel ways to do some of the work? You bet, right? But my hunch, my belief, right, is that we're up for that. We're up for that. We're going to have to sort stuff out. There's no question, right? Do we have all the answers now? No, right? We don't even know what all the challenges are yet, right? But the community is up for the challenge. And what we have to do is to be supportive of the resistance to efforts to decenter justice. Because justice is what drives us. I don't know, Michael, you probably have more specific things to say to that. But.
I think among movement leaders in the environmental justice movement, we're barely dusting off the plasterboard we had to crash through to get to this point. The executive order that Gerald wrote in the early 90s, we've come a long way, and the Biden administration in particular did extraordinary work to mainstream this movement. But we were still pinching ourselves a little bit, and I think there's a way in which the leadership that I speak to, whether young people or older, from different places, but both are just like, yeah. So like we didn't think this was one yet. We didn't feel like we were controlling policy in the halls of power, and we can easily reset to where we have to be to make the plain truths of our work clear and compelling. And then I think the other opportunity, which even some of the big environmental organizations, more senior leaders and retired leaders have said, 20 years ago, CEOs of green groups were talking to their staffs who had written the Clean Air Act and said, this is pretty old already. This was a message that was coming down managerially from visionary leaders in the mainstream environmental movement. That's a pretty old law. What are we going to do now? We're trying to control the Clean Air Act, climate change with the Clean Air Act. I love the Clean Air Act. I studied it. It's not the right tool. And frankly, even trying to control the environment with environmental laws are no longer the right tool, right? Right. Climate is, fossil fuels are deeply embedded in our macro economy, right? The tools we need to transition are macroeconomic and industrial, and policy, and social. We can't ask people who depend on trillions of dollars in cash flow from truck drivers to pipeline operators to lunch counter operators who depend on this particular way of running our world. We can't ask for those transitions to happen without thinking about just transitions and deeply rethinking. So we needed to take the structures back down to the studs. It would be nice to do it in a humane way, in a way that was logical and that could reach good outcomes and not hurt as many people as are being hurt right now. But it's also an opportunity for us all of us to come together in an intersectional way and think about how to rewire the world in the way it needs to be.
One of the things that one of my hobby horses for years, getting effectively nowhere, right, was that environmental lawyers have to take seriously the work of industrial ecologists. That if you take the work of industrial ecologists seriously, then it makes you rethink the way that you approach pollution reduction, right? So it moves us off of the end of pipe kind of solution that the iconic environmental statutes have largely, that characterize the iconic environmental statutes, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. Those acts have been tremendously effective. But what Michael's point is, and I think we should take it seriously, is maybe this is an opportunity to rethink how we accomplish those goals that those acts were designed to achieve, rather than merely defending the systems that we know how to work, but might not be as effective as we need them to be. So we can take this opportunity as a generative moment, like to rethink. Okay, we know what the objective is, right? As the saying goes, there's many paths to Rome. Let's figure out what some of those paths are, right? And so maybe things like the people who are doing industrial ecology over at YSC, right, will be in greater demand, right? That as we think about how we manage throughputs as opposed to just outputs, right? Which is your point. But also to your point, let's say we magically snapped our fingers and converted every vehicle in the country to EVs. What are we going to do about guys who own service stations? What are we going to do about mechanics who made their living fixing carburetors or fixing internal combustion engines, right? They're part of our community too, right? And we have to think about them, just like we have to think about the lives of everyone that are negatively affected by continuing to burn fossil fuels.
It's like a sound gap here. I'm not sure we should put this in the interview.
So,
But I'll say, not quite as generously as we were being a minute ago. We want processes that create toxicity and injustice to be small enough that we can drown them in a bathtub.
I'm going to start calling him Grover.
You don't know the origin of that quote?
Grover Norquist,
Yeah.
right?
yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. Oh.
Right, Grover Norquist had his soundbite was, "We want to shrink government to a size small enough that we can drown it in a bathtub." Right. So that's the genesis of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm going to start calling him Grover. He's not going to like it, but
No, I was definitely calling on him. I've been at a party with Grover, so hey.
No, I think. Well, I want to ask us to keep it. I'm going to tell you why. For me, I think that if we only think about things in terms of capitalism or commerce, we keep doing in the direction that we're going. I think that when we also include and frame things, I got to admit, that's the first time I've heard it like that when you talked about drilling and how, that's actually taken from our ancestors. I mean, and for people like they think that that's like holy. No, it's not. If you think about our soil, how decomposition works, and then you think about where people, and where we honored our ancestors and where they are. Not only does that make sense, we even see probably why the oil is so powerful, but not respecting the history for those who also use that, and also the impact and the contribution that people have made. So I'm not trying to get deep, I'm just feeling something right now, and I appreciate what you're saying. And so with that, being that you all are in the field, on the ground, you all are also doing this in an inclusive way. We talked about being at an elite university, but when you remove that and think about what you all are talking about, you're looking at people from skyscrapers all the way to boots on the ground. What type of advice, and I know you have it to give because you're doing this, you've been successful, but you're also in the midst of challenges too. What kind of advice would you give to environmental justice practitioners, whether it's our beautiful students at YSC, or whether it's people in the city of New Haven, or whether we're talking from here to California or down to New York? What kind of advice would you give to them, especially the state, of course?
I mean, I hesitate to give anybody advice, first of all, right? But when students come to me and are feeling beleaguered, the one thing I can say is, look, I understand that. I understand why you're feeling beleaguered. I understand why you're feeling stressed. I understand why the life plan you had for yourself might seem, decentered now, right? That just means you've got to, think about what you wanted to do with that life plan, right? Not just what job you wanted, right? But what you wanted that job to do, right? And to ask yourself, what are the possibilities to make this happen?
Yes.
Right. And also to when you're thinking about the possibility of change and the possibility of making a more just world, right? That if that's one of the things that drove you to do the work you're going to do, you have to remain committed to that vision, even if it seems hard or far away. I mean, and I don't mean to sound sappy here, and I apologize, but imagine how hard it was for an enslaved person in the South to be able to imagine freedom. If that person can imagine freedom, you can imagine justice and fairness in the world. right? And you are well better situated than that person. Does that mean it's going to be easy? No, it was a 400-year struggle. Do we have 400 years? I don't know if we have 400 years, but we have time, and you are farther down the path to making the changes that you want to see in the world, and you've got to remain committed to that. Period.
Yeah, and I would just say that to me that I totally agree with Gerald. I think the flip side is also self-care, and sometimes that self-care does mean looking directly at the threats. Look at them long enough to where you see a pattern that you can inoculate yourself against. Meaning it's really easy to go, oh my God, why are they attacking us this way or that way, or they're using this, they're using that. No, they're attacking us. That's the pattern, right? Or, and that's okay. You don't have to be an expert in the particular channel of attack or all of the channels of attack, unless it happens to be your job to work on that particular channel or that thing. But just get yourself, if you can, to a place of perspective on what's happening. Go look at The Apprentice if you need to. You're fired. That's what. There was 8 ways you can fire people for 8 reasons, but you're fired. Okay, that's it. That was the pattern of the show. That was the slogan, right? What is the slogan that's coming at us? What's the pattern that's coming at us? Not necessarily in the details. And again, if you're working on some of the details, get to know them. But just to give yourself an anchor of being able to look at the truth of what's happening and be able to protect yourself and to be healthy in the face of that truth. Whether that means you might have to change jobs to keep your house for a little while, or move overseas, or sometimes change. Be careful what you say in some places, depending on where you're at. That's all right. There's many forms of resistance, and I think one of the lessons of environmental justice, from indigenous communities to African American communities to women and low income communities all over the world, is you can also you can abide, and finding the ways to abide that keep your dignity and your health and your children's health is really critical.
Get good at what you do. Get good at what you do. Master the skills you need to master, because those are the things that are allow you to bring value to whatever you're doing. So get good at what you do. That's 1. 2, on self-care, you're a whole person. You got to take care of that whole person. And you can't ever forget that you're a whole person. So if you like music, you like movies, you like poetry, you like reading novels, you like exercising, you got to do all that, right? And you got to do all that because that's the way you stay in the game, right? But I guess if I were talking to students, I'd say get good at the things you do, right? Master the skills you're going to need, and recognize the skills you need to master and move down those paths too.
Practical steps, practical tips. Another thing that you also said, Professor Torres, when you mentioned people, in the South who were enslaved, you mentioned imagine. Like, if you can't imagine, as you can't visualize, as you mentioned, your father worked on Shirley Chisholm's campaign, you had to see her winning, or at least believe it. So I'm also taking from all of the brilliance that you shared I just want to point this out. You know how when they say we need to reconcile, that means that did you reconcile first? That means we're doing something again. Reimagining, redefining, refining, framing, reframing. And you have to keep doing it so that you stay the course. So with that, I want to kind of, as we're bringing this down to a close, I've been now educated by you two wonderful professionals, but I also think people need to be informed. What are some of the good things that you all have accomplished right now at the YCEJ? Because you all have been doing great work here for the last couple of years. And I think, I want to say it this way. I think that the universe says you owe it to yourselves to talk about that. Because I think that one of the things that people struggle with is that they don't talk. And you've been talking good things. It's not at them. But people focus so much on the negative. They focus so much on the hard. And they forget to celebrate, the good things that they're doing. So with all of the brilliance that you've given us and the courage you've shown, what are some good things that I think we should know about what's going on there?
I feel like we've accomplished a lot. and I'll let Michael talk at greater length on this, but a couple of things. One is I think the Global Environmental Justice Conference that we have yearly is important. One of the things that Michael has been very successful at doing is getting raising money for scholarships so we can bring environmental justice activists from around the country to come. And the world, not just the country, and the world around to participate. We always have a spiritual practice as part of the conference because we know that's an essential part of it, right? We have worked closely with Native groups. So the co-management clinic that we have pushed, I think, a long way down the path of exploring what co-management and co-stewardship actually means in the context of natural resource management with Native people and the federal government and state governments. We've looked at different kinds of political structures that exist, like land trust. You can think of land trust as just a way to organize land, but it's also part of the politics of the way land is organized. We've looked at that. We've looked at food systems. We've done some work on food systems. We have a white paper on land trust, a white paper on co-management. We have one of the things that the conference does annually is not just to have a bunch of people talking at panels, but we are generative. So we have produced papers from the substantive streams that the conference has highlighted and focused on. We've greatly expanded the course offerings at the university so that these themes can be studied systematically and critically. I don't know what are a number of things. I don't know what else, Michael.
I mean, I would say, first of all, the campus has probably over 75 faculty who work on environmental justice.
Wow.
And we are enrolling them more and more and trying to serve them more and more. They are out in the world serving out people as well. And I think in some ways I feel like we're just getting started. I think we've also in many ways started to meet the moment thanks to the radar that the Environmental Joy conferences provide us. Last conference was the weekend after the U.S. presidential election. And we came out of that with ideas that we are now funded to do around growing the viability of environmental justice nonprofits in the face of challenges around tax codes and other things. We have an AI now that's a platform that we hope will eventually become global for communities to help them build political will. The first version is called Pepper, Public Participation in Environmental Regulation, which helps communities make comments on emerging regulations. And has lots of other applications for scientists to do the same. Dr. Pepper, we call that. So they can use their peer-reviewed research. A lot of times they have amazing research. They don't have time to write a letter to the federal government about a new regulation. Now they can put their paper into an AI, and that AI is trained on other comments, and we use their specific research to generate data that the agencies need to do better policy making. We're trying to grow more of a footprint in this region, including our global work on climate migration. We have an anchor in the Northeast, in addition to Angola and Mexico. We have an anchor in New Haven as well. So we're just getting started, I would say. And what's been very encouraging is the recognition of the donor community. First of all, just in endowing Professor Taylor, Dorsita Taylor, with the Wangari Maathai chair and Gerald's chair. And as we're trying to, I think, now raise an endowment for the center more generally, so that we can really serve Connecticut and New Haven communities from this university, but also do deep work across the campus and encourage other faculty to spread their wings and students and grad students to fly in that space. So a lot of stuff. We're very excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that gives me the most optimism about the students we produced. They're doing great work. Not just domestically, but internationally. They're good. That next generation, right, they're going to be doing the stuff that the generation we're leaning on did, right? And so that I look at the work they're doing and I think it's great. So a student going down to do work in Latin America. working with Native people, but also working with land use organizations down in Latin America. We're working with other groups to do training for indigenous groups to participate in government decision making around resource use in Latin America. So we've been in conversation with people, with forest people, and people who are doing forest work in Africa. There are allies everywhere. That's the amazing thing that emerges, and there's work enough to be done. We need to figure out how we can help facilitate that work getting done. And part of that is, of course, raising money, which we've got to do. Michael's been great at doing that, but we've got to keep pushing.
Just adding on as a beneficiary of the EJOY conferences and all the work that you've been doing, it's having a large effect on policy. Like right now, that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency is pushing forward. There's people who I met and talked to at the conference, who got a scholarship, who I stayed connected with, and they're leading tours with people who work in the agency, showing people around places in Minneapolis that they oftentimes don't go to. There may be a lot of animosity in different settings, but it's building that relationship that will lead to longer lasting change. And then I met with other people who've been to the conference around my age, and they've invited me to apply to other programs, and I got in, and it's leading to like that solidarity building across the country with our generation. So it's planting those seeds for the future, and it's proliferating other things. So
that's great to hear, man.
I think joy. That we are having the conference after the election, having it be so joyful and so powerful, and having it again this year and next. That's the growing the energy. The energy is really probably if we can we plan on keep growing that, and that I think will be a big deal for all of us.
For listeners, I'm sure you probably all lost count. Wait a minute, Professor, did you want to say something for the story?
No.
So I counted 24 things. And that other voice you heard was our co-host, Brother Ben the Lupo, and of course our other one, Brother Isaac Carew. So I apologize. I'm the co-host of Heartwood. I counted 24 things with everything that you all said. The focus is for us to stay the course, okay, and to lean on each other, I think, and to also, as you was mentioning, self-care and take care of ourselves. So my last question is, and we're closing out, is there anything else that you gentlemen are excited about in your work right now, or just excited about, period? Because you're not just environmental justice practitioners, you're not just lawyers, you're not just scholars, you're actually great human beings. And at least I know one very well. And so, but I'm not just saying it because you're in the room. You wouldn't be able to do what you do if you weren't. So is there anything else, that you're actually excited about?
I'm meeting this moment is leading me to meet a lot of new people. Who've come out of the woodwork and connecting personally with them also, and just new ways of resilience. I'm so excited about that. I just spent 4 days with the Yaqui tribe in Tucson, Arizona. Talk about millennias of resistance, of fierce resistance. I'm really excited about that, and stuff on the family front's good and all that. So
I mean, I think the number of people who are committed to creating the change that's necessary to happen, I think it continues to give me hope. And it's funny because years ago I was asked to write a chapter for a book on a particular Supreme Court case, right? And so the chapter I gave them was completely something they I think were not anticipating. Because I said, well, you cannot really understand this case unless you go back to 1563, right? And I traced the Spanish and Mexican, maybe it was Spanish at that point, right? Entry into Pueblo country in New Mexico. And then I documented the first successful expulsion of European colonists from Indian country, which lasted a generation. When the Pueblos united, even though they spoke 16 different languages, They were able to work during the occupation to resist and push the Spanish out for a generation. Ultimately, they came back in. But unless you understand that history, you couldn't understand the Supreme Court case. Some people thought that was a little far-fetched. I still think it's right. But the lesson of that is that resistance wasn't crushed. It took different forms, right? And what we need to do is we need to look at the way in which resistance takes different forms and responds to the environment within which it is, placed. And so, I think, when I look at the course of my own career, like Michael said, it's put me in contact, and most recently in contact with people that I probably might not have met before.
Yes,
right? But I meet them and I recognize them as allies, right? Allies in their own way, right? But allies, and that gives me hope, and gives me joy.
And let me just say, the article that Gerald refers to is called Hot Tub Time Travel and the Supreme Court.
They made a movie about it, huh?
Tell them the real title.
I don't even remember the real title. I think
Let's go with it.
the title is something like Sandoval. The lesson of Sandoval. I can't remember what the title is. I'll have to get it for you. But
I didn't want to question it because I know we can be kind of eccentric sometimes.
There's a movie made about that. No.
The article I just assigned to my class, I wrote in response to the Baby Veronica case, the Indian Child Welfare Act case, and it's one of those things that probably when you're the heat of the anger of the moment precipitated the drafting of this paper, and perhaps if I'd taken a cold shower, and had iced tea, I might have not sat down and just written it, right? But it's it's about in my view, the race has had a really corrosive impact on American public policy historically, right? And I was documenting a case of how its corrosive impact led some extremely peculiar reasoning in a Supreme Court case. You're right, because the issue in the case, the primary issue in the case was whether this child was a member of a particular tribal nation. Pretty simple question, yes or no, right? But the Supreme Court justice could not let go of the fact that this child was only 125th out of 265th percentage of this particular tribe, right? And at which point I said, well, does anybody ever ask you how much American blood do you have? And the answer is no. Are you American or are you not? Right? It's a binary choice. Right. Same thing in this. So the fascination with the purity of the blood was so bizarre to me that I wrote this thing called American Blood. Right. Don't piss me off.
I'm gonna keep that part in.
Gotta keep that in. Don't piss me off. I'm almost getting him to Bruce Banner. You know what I'm saying? Don't make me angry.
Don't make me angry.
Hey. Well, gentlemen, I just want to say thank you. I know you have.
I gotta go. I gotta get up and print out some stuff and get ready for my defense.
Professors, thank you so much. There's too much to recap. So I'm not going to do it. But I will close with this: take care of yourselves, but also take care of each other.
Yeah.
Respect the history of others. Okay, and then also be open to learn and I think in many ways be willing to be challenged because it'll bring something more out of you. And another thing that I really take away is that the fight never stopped.
Right.
Resistance never stopped. Whether we're talking human rights, civil rights, whether we're talking environmental rights, whether we're talking legal rights, whether we're talking tribal rights, it never stopped, which means that the battle's not over. So the only ones winning are the people who are still fighting. So we have to stay in this. And I want to thank you all for teaching me, teaching us, sharing your time, coming here again and coming back for part 2. And thank you for an amazing part 1.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Heartwood out.
All right.
And I think I lost my.
So your time's a call over?